Story continued from Tyrannosaurus episode. It had been raining for days, a constant downpour that had filled the rivers and saturated the lands. The wet season had arrived, and it is just how the region's top predator likes it. By the river's edge stands a colossal Suchomimus, over 10 meters long, armed with massive claws on each thumb, and jaws lined with over 100 teeth. He is an intimidating sight. However, it is fish that have more to fear from this predator than other species of dinosaur do. His long, crocodile-like skull is evolved to pluck and grip fish from the water's edge. In fact, the name Suchomimus means crocodile mimic. As the rain beats down on his back and tail, the hungry male plunges his head quickly into the water and pulls out a sizable fish by the edge of its tail. With long, conical teeth securing his catch, the large theropod tosses the fish back into his mouth and swallows it whole. He will likely be at this for hours, standing silent and motionless at the neck of this river, snatching any fish that comes within reach. However, a second option is walking in his direction. From a distance, the Suchomimus can hear the calls of a herd of Tyrannosaurus. Silently listening to the calls, he can tell that the large sail-backed hadrosaurs were getting closer, most likely following the banks of the river. With potential prey coming to him, the Suchomimus walked to the river's edge, planning to set an ambush in the surrounding foliage, but he never got that far. As he rounded a bend in the river, his eyes locked with the leading member of the Tyrannosaurus herd. They were less than 200 meters away. He had been spotted before he could even set his ambush, so he went for plan B. The predator charged the herd, hoping to cause a panic and split them up. Despite his size, he was quite fast, and he was closing the distance rapidly. The Tyrannosaurus did begin to panic and called out in loud honks and hoots, and then the lead male plunged into the river and began to swim to the opposite bank. The rest of the herd followed suit. Although they didn't look it, they were strong swimmers, and despite the fast-flowing river, reached the other side quickly. By the time the Suchomimus reached where the herd had originally stood, some of the members were on the opposite rain-soaked bank and were now standing defensively bellowing at the large carnivore. It would be more difficult for the Suchomimus to attack them if he had to cross the river and fight while waist-deep in water. He was about to return to his fishing spot when he heard a cry from the water. Two young Tyrannosaurus, two brothers, were struggling to swim across the river. They did not have the size and strength of the adults, and were now being pulled away by the flow of the river. The Suchomimus saw an opportunity and went for it, running straight into the river and diving beneath the surface briefly before surfacing again. He not only had the features of a crocodile, he swam almost as effectively, keeping his eyes above the water and using his tail to propel himself through the muddy river, locking onto the struggling juveniles. The two brothers used all their strength to try and get to land, not daring to leave one another. But they were fighting against the current, and the Suchomimus was going with it, accelerating towards them like a torpedo. The adults couldn't help them. They could barely keep their heads above the water. And now, they could see a massive set of jaws full of serrated teeth cutting through the water. The Suchomimus only had to choose which one to take. Suddenly, a crushing pain hits his leg from below the water. The predator roared in pain and snapped his jaws shut, just missing the brothers. The Suchomimus pulls his head beneath the water to see what happened to his leg. As his eyes adjusted, he saw the one creature all dinosaurs feared. Sarcosuchus, a massive ancient relative of crocodiles, one that weighed over 4 tons, the true top predator of this land. The Suchomimus tried to pull away, but the massive crocodile pulled the struggling dinosaur under the water, but this battle was far from one-sided. Pulling his head and body down, the Suchomimus twisted his body and grabbed the side of the Sarcosuchus's body with his long jaws, his teeth barely cutting through its thick armor. The Sarcosuchus let go and pulled himself out of the dinosaur's grip, circling for another strike. The crocodilian and the crocodile mimic squared off. The former swam forward, long jaws open, But the Suchomimus was more at home in the water than most dinosaurs, and despite his leg injury, weaved around the croc's attack and dug his long finger claws into its shoulders. Now on its back, the Suchomimus tried to bite the Sarcosuchus's head and neck, but he couldn't break through the tough armor that protected it. The two predators broke the surface, and for a brief moment, the Suchomimus saw something on his back. The two brother Ouranosaurus were on top of him, both looking terrified and drained. There was no time to try and snatch one of them, as the Sarcosuchus submerged again and the brothers were left fighting the river. Under the river, the Sarcosuchus swam under a submerged tree trunk, smashing the Suchomimus into the decaying wood and forcing him off his back. Dazed in the water, the Suchomimus tried to recover his fleeting strength, when the open jaws of the Sarcosuchus speared into him from the side, crushing his midsection with tremendous force. The Suchomimus couldn't reach his attacker with his teeth or claws, and tried to dig his talons on his feet into the croc's side, but once again couldn't penetrate its armor. With the dinosaur now secure in his long jaws, the crocodile thrashed his head rapidly, swinging the multi-ton predator through the water as if he were weightless. Above the water, all that could be seen was a violent space of water that coughed up water, bubbles, foam, and occasionally the tip of a snout or tail. Then the water went calm, and the only sound was the steady fall of rain, as the Sarcosuchus pulled the Suchomimus to the bottom of the river to drown it. On the shores, the two brother Ouranosaurus collapsed on the wet sands, exhausted. They could hear their herd getting closer and knew they would soon be safe. By extraordinary strokes of luck and great feats of stamina, they had survived, even if they could barely move now. The two youngsters huddled together in the rain. They both knew they couldn't rely on luck forever. They had to get stronger, and they would do so together. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we will be breaking down the crocodile mimic himself, Suchomimus. Suchomimus was a large spinosaurid dinosaur found in the Republic of Niger that lived between 125 and 112 million years ago. The first fossils are from a subadult, so its estimated size puts it at 11 meters long, 3.6 meters high, and weighing between 2.5 and 5.2 tons. It had a long, narrow skull, making it look similar to fish-eating crocodiles like gharials and Australian freshwater crocodiles. In its jaws were over 100 teeth that were less serrated than most theropod dinosaurs and hooked back like fishhooks, so they were better adapted for catching and holding slippery prey. You'll also notice the kink near the tip of the jaws. This is also an adaptation for holding onto prey. The nostrils and eyes were higher on the skull than other theropods, indicating a semi-aquatic lifestyle, and another adaptation it shares with crocodilians. The arms were strongly built, with sickle-like claws on its 3 fingers. The largest were on the thumb, which grew to lengths of 30 centimeters. It's argued what these were used for, but common theories include using them to secure and simultaneously gore prey, or to swipe or gaff fish from the water. It had elevated vertebra, but it is unlikely it had any form of sail like its larger cousin Spinosaurus. However, there may have been a fat-storing hump along the back. So it is clear that Suchomimus was at the very least semi-aquatic, though only its head seems adapted to this. It lived during a time when its land was covered in massive rivers and floodplains. Like other spinosaurids, it would have eaten far more than fish, including small to medium dinosaurs, crocodiles, turtles, pterosaurs, and carrion. After all, it was the largest land predator in its area. With all these adaptations for an at least partially piscivore diet, it is safe to assume that Suchomimus was a decent swimmer, and probably swam frequently around when its territory was flooded. Whether it launched itself out of the water like a modern crocodile, I personally don't see happening, as there is no evidence of it having a powerful tail. It shared its environment with species like Ouranosaurus, Elhasrosaurus, Nigersaurus, Critops, Sarcosuchus, and the odd-looking Anthosuchus. Suchomimus is one of the largest predatory dinosaurs of the time, but it doesn't seem to get a lot of attention, probably because of the immense fame its larger cousin Spinosaurus gets. But also because I think people find it odd that such a massive theropod seems to prefer eating fish as opposed to hunting down other dinosaurs. But from everything I can tell, it did indeed hunt and kill large prey, with only the largest sauropods being out of its range. I see it kind of like a grizzly bear of the time, which is also known for loving fish and even catching them as they jump out of rivers. And you wouldn't think less of a grizzly bear because it goes after fish, now would you? Suchomimus is a truly impressive and powerful apex predator, one which we haven't found many remains for, but whose remains have given us a lot of info. Hopefully more fossils can be discovered to reveal more about this carnivore. So what do you think of Suchomimus? Do you prefer those carnivores that try to mimic crocodiles, or like the more traditional land dinosaur killers? Let me know what lesser known dinosaur you'd like me to cover in a future episode. And until then, stay tuned because the story about these two brothers is far from over.